Well, I mean, I think, again, in the interest of time and balance, we really were trying here. The one I would point out here, I've already mentioned Hillary's and the Guggenheim video for Barack, and the Trump ad, the Kasich ad attacking Trump for mocking the disabled reporters, a pretty famous one. The End of American Idealism by Charles Blow is something I thought could be interesting because he takes everybody to task there. He basically says, we have ideals and values in this country, and not one of the candidates in either of the parties is enabling us to live up to this. In fact, they're betraying those ideals. So that would be an interesting one to say, is that nonpartisan? Another one I'd like to point out is Trump's Linguistic Kill Shots by Scott Adams. You may know this is Dilbert's creator. And this is a little YouTube video, and he basically says, this is not a guy who's winging it. This is not, a loose cannon. This is a very, very skilled rhetorician. And then he explains, and Scott Adams presents his own credentials. He said he's studied rhetoric, and he's studied the psychology of influence and I won't say manipulation, but anyway, this one is just interesting because he's very serious, and he said this is a man who knows exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it extremely well. And Scott Adams did that, I think it was about a year or so ago, and since then other people have jumped on that bandwagon. That's really all I have to say about those. Another slide. Nicole. Yeah. The American presidency, the one I mentioned, and then John, I think you added the different clearinghouses on campaign ads, and I think that, going back into the history the way John has is really interesting, because as you look at the election, once you actually have two candidates, you're going to have things like their acceptance speeches at the convention, and then you're going to have one person's inaugural address. You'll have a concession speech by the other candidate. These are really genres, if you will, of their of particular speeches. And so going back to other ones, I think, becomes really important. I mean, not everybody gave John F. Kennedy's speech. What are the characteristics of an inaugural address, for example? So as you're looking toward your curriculum next year, I think that's the kind of thing you would start to investigate and explore. Do we have one last? Last slide.
One last.
Yes, this is the English teacher joke. I remember when he said we need more welders and less philosophers, and this is not anything, and I'm not against Mr. Rubio at all, but this one just seemed an English teacher joke. My husband says to me when I tell him something and he fails to laugh, and he goes, was that an English teacher joke? I think this is we think it's funny. Are there questions?
There are. We do have a couple questions, and anyone else that does have any questions, please send them to me in the chat. So the first question is from Bridget. She says, this is my first year teaching AP. My students will be writing their first research paper. If you assign this paper at this point in the year, what might you ask of them for the paper? We have been studying political rhetoric and candidate solutions, and we just finished watching snippets of the most recent debates as well.
Well, kind of interesting, the idea of a research paper. We tend in AP language to do what we call synthesis essays. I know that my students, practice the synthesis essay that's on the exam under time circumstance, but then they all write a couple of process synthesis essays. I wouldn't call them research projects or research papers because we require them to choose among the sources in TLC usually. So I think probably what I might do would be to pull together some of these resources and kind of insist that your students use those just so that you have some control over the sources that they're going to use. And then, develop a thesis statement, that's something that, an argument that you want your students to make and, illustrate with these resources. I think there are a lot of things here that you could work with, but also maybe some of the texts on politics that are in TLC or elsewhere that they could use for philosophical underpinning.
So maybe take a look at the research paper more as a documented argument
Right,
essay,
right, exactly.
where they're using the research or the sources as evidence to support their own positions, whatever they would be, about whether the, which candidate deserves to be elected, or
maybe
whether
something
the
about
coverage is
the
fair,
rhetoric, right,
or yes,
right.
or the
Or
rhetoric.
advertisements, or, I mean, there are many,
Yeah.
many possibilities.
Whatever the top is.
But I guess the idea is that their argument is first, and they use the sources to support their own argument.
Exactly, well, yes.
And if you don't want the research paper to be an argument, then you simply ask them to follow an issue and to say, what is Mr. Sanders, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Trump, Mrs. Clinton, what are their views on education right now? Or just take something like that and ask them. They are just really synthesizing, and then you're really focusing more on their research than their argument. So our answer will be, we need to know more about your goals.
Yeah.
So, John, I think you started to say something.
Yeah, I just want to throw in one other, and this wouldn't probably be the product, but maybe a step along the way. Maybe your students are different than mine, but whenever we say research to them, they just go to Google and they take one or two of the top pieces.
Right.
So one of the things I think would be kind of interesting with this election series is to do what a lot of news gathering organizations do, which is to fact check. So if you've been watching those debates, pull something out there that maybe you want to check to see whether that's true or not, and then look to see where that information is happening, where you're getting that information, evaluate those sources. I think that
That's a great idea.
it's a product piece, but it would be a process along the way. Just what does it mean to have a good source, a valid source, a source that seems credible? These are, I think, important sort of steps, not the product, but steps along the way. Certainly would be fun for the kids to do, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the New York Times has been doing a lot of fact-checking. After all the debates, they fact-checked everything.
They're busy.
Hillary Kasich in Ohio. Yeah, and Hillary in Michigan. Right. When in the debate with Bernie. Yeah. Any other questions?
Other questions?
Yeah, our next question is from Tyler. He says, do you guys have any really good examples of two articles from different perspectives?
Well, obviously there's silence here, so you're all thinking. Two perspectives. Two perspectives on one subject. Was that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's a great idea and question, and we didn't put that together, but I bet all I'd have to do is to go to two different newspaper sources to look at the town hall, assess who won the town hall, who won the debate. That would be interesting. Sometime two op-ed responders would be a way to look at that. In New York, certainly, whatever the New York Times says, the New York Post and often the Daily News say the exact opposite. Yeah. So those are certainly, I don't know what town you're from, but, those are two you could definitely look at, particularly on the subject of education. It's very contentious here in New York, and the Post takes a very much opposite view of the Times.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a recommendation from a fellow teacher who is saying, look at the New York Times Room for Debate page. Yeah, it's
great.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yes, excellent.
Yeah.
We've received a comment from Pam saying, thank you for this opportunity. I'm already planning relevant lessons and I can't wait.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. And also, we have talked about following this up with one in August where we would actually share ideas for how to set up this as part of the curriculum. So if you have ideas for that, if you're interested, you need to please let Nicole know. And I see some names here that I'm not looking at all of them. I can't get them all, but Brittany, hello. Karen, hello. Elizabeth, hello. I recognize a few names. So anyway, it's nice to feel some familiar faces.
Does anyone have any more questions? I did just put my email address up on the slide, so if you do have any ideas or webinars that you'd like to see, you can always feel free to reach out to me. We've gotten some great comments. Brittany says, hello, Renee. Hope all is well. Kristen says, let's meet up again in August. The timing would be really helpful. Elizabeth, welcome to your first webinar. I'm glad you're joining us tonight. Does anyone have any other questions that we can pass along? Just getting a lot of thank yous and a lot of hopes for an August webinar. So.
And thank you, Nicole.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Good job. So I'm sorry the audio didn't work, but
Okay.
I will send out the presentations and the links to everybody. So.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.